The coffee cup hit the marble conference table at Colton's Steakhouse with enough force to crack the porcelain, sending espresso spreading across $20,000 worth of architectural plans. Marcus Blackwell didn't apologize. Billionaires worth $8 billion didn't apologize for displays of frustration when 6 months and $30 million had produced exactly nothing. Impossible. Marcus's voice was quiet, which his 12 executives had learned to fear more than shouting. You're telling me the Richardson Tower is impossible? That we're going to miss our deadline, lose a $300 million contract, and fail to honor my mentor's dying wish because nobody in this room can solve basic structural logistics? Dr. Gerald Hampton, Harvard Ph.D., 20 years of experience, $400,000 salary, stared at the espresso-soaked plans with the defeated expression of a man who'd exhausted every option. The building codes won't allow it, Marcus. We've consulted MIT, Stanford, Cambridge. A 70-story mixed-use tower on that foundation with your asymmetric design, it violates load-bearing requirements. We'd need to exceed budget by $200 million or compromise the vision entirely. Around the table, 11 other executives avoided eye contact. Vice presidents, senior architects, structural engineers, all expertly compensated, all utterly useless when it mattered. They'd moved the emergency meeting from the boardroom to Colton's at 9 p.m. because Marcus conducted his best thinking over obscenely expensive meals. Other diners pretended not to stare at the billionaire having a very public crisis across 3 pushed-together tables covered in blueprints and elevation drawings. Comment where you're watching from if you've ever felt this kind of frustration. Coffee. Marcus didn't look up when someone approached the table. Black. No sugar. And tell the kitchen I want the porterhouse, rare, with. You need a cantilever truss system with distributed load columns. The voice was young, female, and absolutely not one of his executives. Marcus looked up. A young black woman, maybe 21, 22 at most, stood beside their table holding an order pad. She wore Colton's standard server uniform, her natural hair pulled into a neat professional bun, and she was studying his architectural plans with an expression that suggested she actually understood what she was seeing. Excuse me. Marcus's tone could have frozen the Atlantic. Your building. She pointed to the elevation drawings with a slender finger. You're trying to support asymmetric upper floors on a narrow foundation plot. Traditional vertical load bearing won't work. The weight distribution creates failure points at the 32nd and 48th floors where your design shifts angles. But if you implement a cantilever truss system with distributed columns that transfer weight horizontally through tension members before directing load down through a reinforced central core, you can achieve the asymmetric design without violating building codes or exceeding your structural budget. The table fell into stunned silence. 12 executives with master's degrees and decades of experience stared at a waitress who just proposed a solution they'd spent 6 months and $30 million failing to find. Marcus laughed. Not from amusement. From disbelief bordering on contempt. A waitress is giving me engineering advice. This is what my career has come to. Several executives chuckled nervously. Dr. Hampton's laugh was louder, deliberately condescending. Young lady, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but structural engineering is slightly more complex than you seem to understand. Perhaps you should focus on bringing coffee and let the adults handle problems that require actual expertise. I have actual expertise. The waitress's voice stayed calm, professional, unbothered by the dismissal. Your current design uses conventional vertical columns that concentrate load at specific points. That's why you're hitting code violations. The pressure per square inch exceeds safety thresholds at critical junctures. A cantilever system distributes that same load across broader surface area through horizontal tension, reducing pressure concentration while maintaining structural integrity. That's a lovely theory, Dr. Hampton said with a patronizing smile. But theory and practical application are very different things. Building codes exist for reasons that. Building codes exist to ensure safety through specific load tolerances measured in pounds per square inch across bearing surfaces. The waitress pulled a napkin from her apron pocket and grabbed a pen. Your current design puts approximately 18,000 psi on the foundation at maximum load. Boston Building Code allows 12,000 for that soil composition. That's why you're failing inspections. She began sketching on the napkin, not crude doodles, but precise technical drawings with measurements, angles, load arrows. A cantilever truss transfers weight through tension members. Think of a bridge suspension system applied vertically. The distributed columns I'm proposing spread your 18,000 psi across 6 load points instead of 2, reducing individual pressure to 9,000 psi. Well within code, well within your budget, and it actually improves earthquake resistance because the system has built-in flexibility. Marcus found himself leaning forward despite his skepticism. The napkin sketch showed sophisticated understanding of structural engineering, load calculations, force vectors, material stress tolerances. This wasn't casual knowledge. This was someone who actually understood what she was talking about. Who the hell are you? Marcus demanded. Maya Santos. Your waitress for the evening. She set the napkin on top of the architectural plans. Your coffee will be right out. She walked away with the calm confidence of someone who just solved a $30 million problem and knew it. Dr. Hampton picked up the napkin, studied it with narrowed eyes. His expression shifted from condescension to confusion to something that looked like recognition. He pulled out his phone, typed frantically, read something on screen. Marcus. Hampton's voice had gone strange. I need to show you something. He turned his phone around. On screen was an academic paper from the Journal of Structural Engineering, published 18 months ago, Innovative Load Distribution in High-Rise Construction Through Cantilever Truss Applications. Author, M. Santos, Georgia Institute of Technology. This paper revolutionized how we think about asymmetric building design, Hampton said quietly. It's been cited 217 times. The author graduated Georgia Tech at 20 years old with a master's in structural engineering. Youngest graduate in program history. Top 3% of her class. He looked up at Marcus, his face pale. If that waitress is the same M. Santos who wrote this paper, we just insulted one of the most brilliant structural engineers in the country. Marcus looked across the restaurant to where Maya Santos was calmly taking another table's order, completely unbothered by the chaos she'd left behind. A 21-year-old black waitress had just solved the problem his entire executive team couldn't. And he dismissed her with contempt because she was serving him coffee instead of sitting at his table. Comment where you're watching from if you think he deserves what's coming. The question wasn't whether her solution would work. The question was how someone with that level of genius ended up working at a steakhouse instead of designing the buildings that would define Boston's skyline. And whether Marcus Blackwell was about to make the biggest mistake of his career by letting her walk away. Marcus showed up at Maya's apartment in Dorchester at 7 a.m. carrying two things, an insulated cup of expensive coffee and a contract worth $50,000. The building was exactly what he'd expected, worn brick exterior, stairs that creaked, hallways that smelled like decades of cooking and deferred maintenance. The kind of place where brilliant minds lived when the world refused to pay them what they were worth. Maya opened the door on a third knock, wearing Georgia Tech sweatpants and a tank top, her natural hair wrapped in a silk scarf. Her studio apartment was maybe 300 square feet, a bed against one wall, a desk covered in engineering textbooks and rolled blueprints against another, a kitchenette so small turning around required planning. But what caught Marcus's attention was the wall above her desk, framed degrees, academic awards, and a photograph of a younger Maya in graduation regalia standing beside an older black woman who had her same eyes and smile. How did you find my address? Maya asked without inviting him inside. I'm a billionaire. Finding people is easy. Marcus held out the coffee. Peace offering. Ethiopian single origin, no sugar. I'm not interested in whatever you're selling, Mr. Blackwell. I'm not selling. I'm buying. Specifically, I'm buying 48 hours of your time. Marcus pulled out the contract. Prove your cantilever truss solution works. Join my team for 2 days. If you're right, I pay you $50,000 as a consultant fee and we go our separate ways. If you're wrong, you get nothing but wasted time. Maya crossed her arms. I don't need validation from a man who dismissed me as just a waitress in front of his entire team. You're right. I was an ass. I judged you based on your job instead of your knowledge, and I apologize. Marcus met her eyes. But I'm not here because I feel guilty. I'm here because the Richardson Tower project is personal. Richard Richardson was my mentor 20 years ago, gave a poor kid from Southie his first real job when I had nothing but anger and ambition. He died 3 months ago. His last wish was for me to build this tower as his legacy. If I fail, I don't just lose money. I fail the man who believed in me when nobody else did. Something shifted in Maya's expression. Why me? You have a dozen engineers on staff. Because they spent 6 months and $30 million getting nowhere. You spent 60 seconds looking at plans and solved it. Marcus paused. And because that paper you published, the one Hampton showed me last night, proposed exactly the kind of innovative thinking this project needs. 50,000 for 2 days is generous, Maya said slowly. Suspiciously generous. Then let me be suspiciously clear about what I actually want. Marcus handed her the contract. If your solution works, I don't want you to consult and disappear. I want you to join Blackwell Industries full-time as senior structural engineer. Salary commensurate with expertise, $250,000 annually to start, with performance bonuses. Your own team. Real projects. A career that matches your talent instead of wasting it serving overpriced steaks to people who can't see genius when it's standing in front of them. Maya took the contract, read it carefully. This says if my solution fails, I get nothing. Not even compensation for my time. Because I need to know you believe in your work enough to bet on it. Anyone can talk theory. I need someone willing to stake their reputation on results. Comment where you're watching from if you take this bet. And if I refuse? Then I go back to my team of expensive Harvard graduates who've proven they can't solve this problem, I miss my deadline, I lose $300 million, and I fail Richard Richardson's memory. And you go back to serving coffee while every engineering firm in Boston continues ignoring your applications because they can't imagine a 21-year-old black woman could actually be as brilliant as your credentials suggest. The truth of that statement hung between them. 48 hours, Maya said finally. But I want it in writing. If my solution works, I get the job offer. Not a maybe. Not a, we'll consider it. A guaranteed position with the title and salary you just quoted. Marcus pulled out a pen, added a clause to the contract by hand, initialed it. Done. Maya signed. When do we start? Now. 2 hours later, Maya walked into the Blackwell Industries headquarters conference room wearing professional clothes she'd clearly pulled from the back of her closet, a blazer that had seen better days, slacks that were slightly too short, shoes that were practical rather than expensive. She carried a leather portfolio that looked older than she was. 12 executives stared at her with expressions ranging from skepticism to outright hostility. Dr. Hampton sat at the far end of the table, his arms crossed and his face set in the expression of someone who'd already decided this was a waste of time. Gentlemen, Marcus said from the head of the table. This is Maya Santos. For the next 48 hours, she's lead engineer on the Richardson Tower structural redesign. You will provide her with whatever resources, data, or support she requests. You will treat her with the same respect you'd show any senior engineer. Are we clear? Grudging nods around the table. Maya set her portfolio down, pulled out the napkin sketch from the night before. Let's start with what doesn't work about your current design and why my solution fixes it. For the next 3 hours, she systematically dismantled and rebuilt the Richardson Tower structural plan. She used the digital whiteboard to draw load calculations, force diagrams, material stress tolerances. She explained how cantilever trusses had been used successfully in bridge construction for a century but rarely applied to high-rise buildings because architects didn't think vertically about horizontal load distribution. Dr. Hampton interrupted constantly, raising objections that were technically sophisticated and designed to undermine her credibility. Maya handled each one with patient precision, showing her math, citing building codes, referencing case studies from projects in Tokyo, Singapore, Dubai. "Your concern about lateral wind load is valid," Maya said in response to Hampton's seventh interruption. "But that's actually where the cantilever system excels. Traditional vertical columns are rigid, wind stress concentrates at connection points. Cantilever trusses have built-in flexibility. They distribute wind load across the entire structural system instead of concentrating it. It's why suspension bridges survive hurricanes while rigid structures fail." By hour 4, even the skeptics were leaning forward, asking genuine questions instead of hostile ones. By hour 5, Marcus's lead architect admitted that Maya's design was not only sound but actually superior to anything they'd proposed. "The real test is simulation," Dr. Hampton said. "Theory is lovely, but we need to see if this actually works under computer modeling with real load calculations, real materials, real building specifications." "Agreed." Maya looked at Marcus. "How long does your simulation software need to run a full structural analysis?" 6 hours for something this complex." "Then let's start now. I'll input the specifications myself so there's no question about accuracy." Maya spent the next 90 minutes inputting data into Blackwell Industries' structural engineering software, measurements, materials, load calculations, wind factors, seismic considerations, safety margins. The team watched over her shoulder, checking her numbers, finding no errors. She hit the run command at 4:30 p.m. "Simulation complete at 10:30 tonight. I suggest we all go home, get dinner, and come back for results." "I'm staying," Dr. Hampton said. "I want to watch this fail in real time." "Suit yourself." Maya gathered her things. "Mr. Blackwell, I'll see you at 10:30. At 10:28 p.m., the conference room was full again. Maya stood beside the computer display, her expression calm but her hands betraying slight tremor. 6 hours of her professional reputation rode on whatever appeared on that screen. The simulation completed. Results populated across 3 monitors. Structural integrity, pass. Load distribution, optimal. Building code compliance, full compliance. Safety margins, exceeds requirements by 23%. Estimated construction cost, $187 million, $15 million under original budget. The room erupted. Engineers crowding around monitors, checking numbers, running secondary calculations. Everything worked. Not just marginally, perfectly. Dr. Hampton stared at the screen, his face unreadable. Marcus looked at Maya. "You just saved my project. Welcome to Blackwell Industries." Maya allowed herself a small smile. The first real smile since entering the building 12 hours ago. Marcus's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, answered. "Thomas, it's almost 11 p.m., this better be," his expression changed. "What? When? Are you certain?" He hung up, his face grim. That was Thomas Crane, the city building inspector. Someone filed an anonymous complaint about the Richardson Tower project. Detailed, technically sophisticated, claiming structural violations. He's launching a full investigation. All construction permits are suspended immediately. Maya's smile disappeared. Someone with engineering knowledge filed that complaint. Someone who knew enough about your project to target specific vulnerabilities. Marcus looked at Dr. Hampton, who suddenly couldn't meet his eyes. "Gerald," Marcus said quietly. "What did you do?" Dr. Gerald Hampton stood slowly, his chair scraping against polished floor. "I don't know what you're implying, Marcus. But I find it insulting that you'd accuse me of sabotage based on nothing but paranoid speculation. Then explain how an anonymous complaint targets structural details from our internal meeting 3 weeks ago. Marcus pulled up the complaint document on screen, highlighting specific sections. This references load calculations we never made public. Connection points that only exist in our proprietary designs. Foundation depth specifications that aren't in any permit application. Perhaps we have a data breach, Hampton suggested. Corporate espionage through hacking. Or perhaps we have a traitor. Maya stepped forward, studying the complaint text. Mr. Blackwell, can I see your meeting attendance records for the past 6 months? Marcus pulled them up. Maya cross-referenced with the complaint's technical details. Every specific issue mentioned in this complaint was discussed in meetings where Dr. Hampton was present. And look at the language, asymmetric load concentration at 32nd floor junction. That's the exact phrasing Dr. Hampton used in the August 14th meeting. Not 32nd story or level 32. Junction. That's his specific terminology. Hampton's face flushed. That proves nothing. Lots of engineers used that term. Not in combination with these 6 other identical phrasings. Maya highlighted them one by one. This complaint wasn't written by someone who hacked your files. It was written by someone who attended your meetings and took detailed notes specifically to undermine the project later. Why would I sabotage my own work? Hampton demanded. I've dedicated 6 months to this project. My reputation is attached to its success. Is it? Marcus opened his computer, pulled up financial records he'd been ignoring because he trusted his team. Because our accounting department just flagged something interesting. You've been receiving consulting payments from Titan Construction for the past 4 months. $20,000 per month. Titan Construction is owned by Victor Brennan, the competitor who bid against me for the Richardson Tower contract and lost. The room went silent. Hampton's expression shifted from defensive to calculating. Those payments are for legitimate consulting work. I provide structural engineering advice to multiple firms. There's nothing illegal about that. There is when you're simultaneously working on projects that directly compete with your consulting clients, Maya said. And when you're leaking proprietary information to give them competitive advantages. Mr. Blackwell, do you have an employment contract with Dr. Hampton? Marcus pulled it up. Maya read through quickly, found the clause she was looking for. Standard non-compete and confidentiality agreement. You're specifically prohibited from consulting for competitors during your employment. You violated your contract. And more importantly, you committed industrial espionage. Comment where you're watching from if you saw this coming. You can't prove I leaked anything, Hampton said, but his voice had lost its confidence. Actually, I can. Marcus pulled up email logs. Our IT department monitors outgoing emails for security purposes. 3 weeks ago, you sent 14 emails to an external address not affiliated with Titan Construction. Those emails contained attachments totaling 47 megabytes, suspiciously close to the file size of our complete Richardson Tower design package. I was backing up my work to personal cloud storage. The email address is vbrennanconsult@protonmail.com. Marcus looked at Hampton with contempt that could have melted steel. Victor Brennan's initials. You weren't backing up your work. You were handing him everything he needed to file a complaint that would shut down our project and give him time to swoop in as the alternative contractor. Hampton was silent for 10 seconds. Then his shoulders sagged. Victor offered me equity in Titan Construction. 20% ownership if I helped him win the Richardson contract. That's generational wealth, Marcus. More than you've ever paid me despite years of loyalty. Loyalty? Marcus's voice was deadly quiet. You sold out your employer, violated your contract, and sabotaged a project honoring a dead man's memory. That's the opposite of loyalty. That's betrayal for profit. You would have done the same thing 20 years ago when you were hungry, Hampton shot back. Don't pretend you built your empire through noble principles. You built it by being ruthless and taking opportunities nobody else had the courage to take. I built it by outworking everyone and delivering results. Not by stabbing people in the back while cashing their paychecks. Marcus pulled out his phone. Security is escorting you out of the building. You're fired immediately for cause. Expect legal action for breach of contract and theft of proprietary information. And Gerald, Victor Brennan is going to throw you under the bus the moment this becomes public. Equity promises from men like him are worthless. Security arrived 3 minutes later. Hampton left without another word, his 20-year career destroyed in a conference room at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. After he was gone, Marcus slumped into his chair. We still have a problem. The complaint is filed. Inspector Crane has to investigate regardless of who submitted it. We have 72 hours before penalty clauses kick in, $300 million if we miss our construction deadline. Then we convince Inspector Crane that my design solves every issue in the complaint, Maya said. We schedule an emergency hearing, present the simulation results, demonstrate that our new structural system not only meets code but exceeds it. Crane is thorough. He won't approve anything without extensive review, and we don't have time for that. Marcus rubbed his face. And Victor Brennan isn't going to let this go quietly. If Hampton leaked our designs, Brennan knows exactly what vulnerabilities to target. So we go on offense, Maya said. We don't just defend against the complaint. We publicly demonstrate that our design is superior. Force Brennan to defend his position in front of city officials who understand engineering. How? Request a public hearing with the building department. Invite media. Make this about transparency and safety rather than corporate competition. If Brennan wants to challenge my engineering, let him do it in front of witnesses where his incompetence becomes public record. Maya pulled up the complaint again. Because there's something else interesting here. The complaint mentions Building Code Section July 3, 3401, seismic load requirements. That code was amended 2 years ago. The version Brennan cited in this complaint is outdated. He's challenging our design based on codes that are no longer current. Marcus leaned forward. Meaning his complaint is technically invalid. Meaning whoever wrote this for him, probably Hampton, was working from old reference materials. They made a mistake. And mistakes create opportunities. Maya smiled. We schedule the hearing for tomorrow afternoon. We present simulation results. We point out that the complaint cites outdated codes. And we dare Victor Brennan to defend his position in person. He'll bring his own engineers to attack your design. Let him. My engineering is sound. His complaint is not. In a fair fight with competent officials watching, we win. Maya met Marcus's eyes. Unless you don't trust my work. I trust your work. I'm worried about Brennan playing dirty in ways we can't predict. Then we play cleaner and smarter. Maya gathered her portfolio. Schedule the hearing for 2 p.m. tomorrow at the building department. I'll prepare presentation materials tonight. And Mr. Blackwell, get some sleep. Tomorrow we're going to war with a man who thinks he can destroy your project. I intend to prove him wrong. Marcus watched her leave, this 21-year-old woman who'd gone from waitress to his best strategic asset in 48 hours. His phone buzzed. Text from Inspector Thomas Crane, hearing scheduled tomorrow 2 p.m. Be prepared to defend every aspect of your structural design. Victor Brennan and his engineering team will be present to argue against permit reinstatement. Marcus texted back, we'll be ready. But as he sat alone in the conference room, he wondered if ready would be enough. Because Victor Brennan hadn't built a billion-dollar construction empire by losing fights. And tomorrow's hearing would determine whether Richard Richardson's legacy became reality or remained an impossible dream. The Boston Building Department conference room was built for bureaucratic meetings, not battles. 20 uncomfortable chairs, fluorescent lighting, walls painted the color of institutional beige. But at 2 p.m. on Wednesday afternoon, it felt like a courtroom where reputations and fortunes would be decided. Inspector Thomas Crane sat at the head of the long table, 60 years old, gray beard, eyes that had reviewed 10,000 building plans and spotted every corner cut, every code violation, every attempt to slide substandard work past his desk. He'd built his career on being incorruptible and thorough. Nothing got approved without earning it. Marcus and Maya arrived first, carrying laptops and presentation materials. Maya wore the same blazer from yesterday, but she'd ironed it and paired it with better shoes. She looked professional despite limited resources, the kind of polish that came from intelligence rather than money. Victor Brennan entered 5 minutes later like a man who owned the building. 62 years old, silver hair, custom suit that cost more than Maya's car, flanked by 4 engineers carrying briefcases and the confident expressions of people accustomed to winning. He smiled when he saw Marcus, the smile of a predator who'd cornered prey. Marcus. Still trying to salvage that vanity project? Brennan took a seat directly across the table. I admire persistence, even when it's delusional. Victor. Still filing fraudulent complaints when you can't compete legitimately? Marcus kept his voice level. Nothing fraudulent about protecting public safety. Brennan gestured to his engineers. I brought actual experts to explain why your design is dangerous. I see you brought. He looked at Maya with deliberate dismissiveness. You're Waitress. Senior structural engineer, Maya corrected calmly. And I'm the person who designed the system you're challenging. So this should be interesting. Inspector Crane cleared his throat. Let's begin. Mr. Brennan, your complaint claims the Richardson Tower project violates multiple building codes and presents structural safety risks. Present your evidence. Brennan's lead engineer, a white man in his 50s named Dr. Richard Foster, stood and activated a presentation on the wall monitor. The proposed design uses unconventional cantilever truss systems that lack adequate testing for buildings of this height. The asymmetric floor layouts create uneven load distribution that concentrates dangerous stress at specific points. And the foundation depth is insufficient for the weight load we're discussing. He clicked through slides showing calculations, code citations, engineering standards. Everything looked legitimate to anyone who didn't understand the underlying math. Additionally, Dr. Foster continued, we question the qualifications of the individual who designed this system. Innovative structures require experienced engineers with proven track records. Allowing an untested designer to experiment on a 70-story building puts lives at risk. You're questioning my qualifications? Maya asked. I'm questioning whether someone your age has the experience to design something this complex safely. Dr. Foster's tone was patronizing. I've been a structural engineer for 30 years. I've designed 47 high-rise buildings. How many have you designed, Miss Santos? None. This is my first. Maya stood, walked to the monitor. But experience isn't the same as competence. May I address your technical concerns? Inspector Crane nodded. Maya pulled up her own presentation. Dr. Foster claims cantilever truss systems lack adequate testing for this height. That's incorrect. The Burj Khalifa uses cantilever principles for its structural core. Tokyo Skytree incorporates distributed load systems nearly identical to mine. The Shanghai Tower features asymmetric weight distribution managed through tension members. All are taller than 70 stories. All passed rigorous safety testing. The cantilever truss isn't experimental, it's proven. She clicked to her next slide showing load calculations. Dr. Foster claims my design creates dangerous stress concentration. But he's analyzing the old design from 3 weeks ago, the one Dr. Gerald Hampton leaked to your firm. My new design eliminates those stress points by distributing load across 6 columns instead of 2. Maximum pressure at any single point is 9,000 psi, well below the 12,000 psi threshold for our foundation type. Dr. Foster interrupted. You're oversimplifying complex load dynamics. I'm explaining complex load dynamics to people who may not have structural engineering backgrounds. Maya pulled up a simulation video showing her design under various stress conditions. This is a complete structural analysis. Wind load, seismic activity, maximum occupancy weight, snow load, all calculated with 20% safety margins beyond code requirements. The building doesn't just pass, it exceeds standards. She turned to face Dr. Foster directly. And regarding foundation depth, you cited Building Code July 3, 3401 in your complaint. That code was revised 2 years ago. Current code is July 5, 3401, which reduces required foundation depth by 18 inches for reinforced concrete cores exactly like mine. Your complaint is based on outdated regulations. Comment where you're watching from if you love watching someone prove their expertise. Dr. Foster's face flushed. A technicality. Not a technicality. A fundamental error that invalidates your entire complaint. Maya pulled up the current building codes on screen, highlighting the exact sections. You challenged our foundation depth using standards that no longer apply. That's either incompetence or deliberate misrepresentation. Victor Brennan stood abruptly. Inspector Crane, this is absurd. You're going to let a 21-year-old with zero practical experience lecture seasoned engineers about building codes? She published one academic paper and suddenly she's qualified to design Boston's skyline. She's qualified enough to catch your team citing outdated codes, Marcus said. Let's test her qualification then. Brennan pulled a folder from his briefcase. Since Miss Santos is so confident, I have a challenge. I'll present a structural problem, a real engineering scenario. If she can solve it right here, right now, I'll withdraw my complaint. If she can't, Mr. Blackwell withdraws his permit application and Richardson Tower dies permanently. Inspector Crane frowned. Mr. Brennan, this hearing isn't a game show. I accept, Maya said. Marcus grabbed her arm. Maya, you don't have to prove anything to him. Yes, I do. Because even if Inspector Crane approves our design today, Brennan will file appeals, create delays, find other ways to obstruct. But if I beat him publicly, in front of a city official, he has no credibility left. Maya looked at Brennan. Present your problem. Brennan smiled like a shark. Design a support system for a 40-story building on soil with load-bearing capacity of only 4,000 psi, foundation depth limited to 30 feet due to underground utilities, and seismic zone requirements for magnitude 6.5 earthquakes. Make it structurally sound, code-compliant, and economically viable. You have 15 minutes. It was an intentionally impossible problem, the kind used in graduate programs to demonstrate why certain projects can't be built. Low soil capacity, shallow foundation, high seismic requirements. The constraints contradicted each other. Dr. Foster was barely suppressing a smile. Brennan's other engineers looked satisfied. They just trapped Maya in a problem that had no solution. 15 minutes, Brennan repeated. Starting now. Maya walked to the whiteboard, picked up a marker. For 5 seconds she stood motionless, her back to the room. Then she began drawing. For 12 minutes, she worked in complete silence. Lines became diagrams. Diagrams became calculations. Calculations became a complete structural system. Marcus watched her create something from nothing, her hand moving with absolute certainty, no hesitation, no doubt. This wasn't someone guessing. This was someone who understood engineering so completely that the solution appeared fully formed in her mind before her hand translated it to the board. At minute 14, she stepped back. On the whiteboard was a floating foundation system, a structural design that distributed weight through a grid of interconnected support pads instead of traditional deep pilings. The system worked around the shallow depth limitation by spreading load horizontally. It managed seismic requirements through isolation bearers that absorbed earthquake motion. It compensated for low soil capacity through sheer surface area. Inspector Crane stood, walked to the board, studied it with widening eyes. This is. He pulled out his phone, started taking photographs. This is brilliant. You just solved a problem that's been theoretical in structural engineering for 20 years. Floating grids have been proposed but never successfully implemented at this scale. How did you? He stopped, looked at Victor Brennan and his team of engineers who'd gone completely silent. Mr. Brennan, Inspector Crane said quietly. Ms. Santos just solved your impossible problem in 14 minutes. I'm reinstating the Richardson Tower permits immediately. Your complaint is dismissed. Brennan's face had gone purple with rage. This hearing was a farce. The conference room door burst open. A young woman in a business suit, breathing hard like she'd been running. Inspector Crane, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's been an emergency. The Brennan Tower on Boylston Street, part of the facade just collapsed. 3 people injured by falling debris. Fire department is on scene now. The room froze. Inspector Crane grabbed his coat. Mr. Brennan, we'll discuss your project permits after I assess the damage. Everyone else, this hearing is adjourned. As Crane rushed out, Brennan stood motionless, his confidence shattered like the facade of his flagship building. And Maya Santos quietly set down her marker, having just solved the impossible while Brennan's career collapsed around him. The news footage played on every screen in Boston by 6 p.m. Brennan Tower, Victor Brennan's flagship project, completed 18 months ago at a cost of $400 million, with a section of its glass and steel facade lying in chunks across Boylston Street. Emergency vehicles surrounded the building. 3 pedestrians on stretchers being loaded into ambulances. Structural engineers in hard hats examining the damage while police cordoned off 2 city blocks. Maya watched from Marcus's office on the 42nd floor of Blackwell Tower, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Marcus stood beside her, phone pressed to his ear as he listened to preliminary reports from city officials. Facade failure at the 38th floor, Marcus repeated what he was hearing. No warning signs. The curtain wall mounting system just gave way. 2 tons of glass and steel fell 100 feet onto the street. He hung up. They're evacuating the building. Inspector Crane is ordering a full structural review before anyone's allowed back inside. That's not a curtain wall failure, Maya said quietly. Curtain walls don't just attach without underlying structural problems. Something's wrong with the load-bearing system behind the facade. How can you know that from television footage? Because facade failures are symptoms, not causes. The curtain wall failed because the structural frame it was attached to shifted or degraded. That doesn't happen in an 18-month-old building unless there are serious engineering defects. Maya pulled out her laptop. Does Brennan Tower's structural design exist in public records? Permit applications and basic plans would be filed with the city. Why? Because Inspector Crane is going to need someone to assess that building's structural integrity. And I want to know who designed it before I volunteer for that job. Maya typed rapidly, accessing Boston's building permit database. Brennan Tower permits filed March 2021, construction completed August 2023, occupancy approved September 2023. She clicked through documents, found the structural engineer of record, and went very still. What? Marcus asked. Dr. Gerald Hampton. He was the lead structural engineer on Brennan Tower. 2 years before he joined your company. Maya turned her laptop so Marcus could see. Hampton designed the building that just failed. Which means the man you trusted with the Richardson Tower project has a history of faulty engineering. Marcus's phone rang. Inspector Crane. Marcus answered on speaker. Marcus, I need a favor. The Brennan Tower situation is worse than initial reports suggested. We're finding evidence of structural deficiencies beyond the facade failure. I need a second opinion from an engineer who isn't connected to Brennan or his firm. Someone I can trust to give me honest assessment even if the results are catastrophic. You want Maya Santos, Marcus said. I want Maya Santos. She just demonstrated in my conference room that she understands structural engineering better than people with 30 years experience. I need her to review Brennan Tower's design documents and tell me if this building is safe or if we're looking at a complete evacuation scenario. Crane paused. This is a paying city contract. $25,000 for emergency structural assessment with complete report due in 48 hours. Is she available? Maya leaned toward the phone. Inspector Crane, this is Maya Santos. I'm available. But you should know something first. Dr. Gerald Hampton was the original structural engineer on Brennan Tower. He's the same engineer who was sabotaging the Richardson project. If there are engineering defects in that building, they may trace directly back to his calculations. Silence on the line. Then Crane swore quietly. That's a conflict of interest that's going to complicate criminal investigations. But it doesn't change my immediate problem. I need to know if Brennan Tower is structurally sound. Can you assess it objectively despite the Hampton connection? Engineering doesn't care about personal conflicts, Maya said. Math is math. If the building's unsafe, I'll tell you. If it's salvageable, I'll tell you that too. Then you're hired. My office will send over all design documents, permit applications, inspection reports, and as-built drawings within the hour. I need your preliminary assessment by tomorrow morning. Full report by Friday. Crane hung up. Marcus looked at Maya. You just took a city contract while simultaneously working on my project. That's going to be intense. Intense is better than bored. Maya was already pulling up structural analysis software on her laptop. Besides, if Hampton's faulty engineering caused that facade failure, it proves he was incompetent long before he joined your team. That helps our case if Brennan tries to claim we're scapegoating him. Comment where you're watching from if karma is finally catching up. The design documents arrived at 7 p.m., 300 pages of structural drawings, calculations, material specifications, and inspection records. Maya spread them across Marcus's conference table and began the methodical process of reviewing every calculation, every connection detail, every load-bearing element. Marcus ordered dinner from the executive kitchen and worked on Richardson Tower logistics while Maya analyzed Brennan's building. By midnight, she'd filled 2 legal pads with notes and flagged 47 concerns in the original design documents. Marcus. Maya's voice was tight. You need to see this. He came to stand beside her. She'd pulled up facade connection details, the specific engineering that attached the glass curtain wall to the building's structural frame. Hampton used undersized bolts for the mounting brackets. The specifications call for 1-inch diameter high-strength steel bolts rated for 12,000 pounds each. He substituted 3/4-inch bolts rated for 7,000 pounds. Maya highlighted the discrepancy. The facade weighs approximately 4 tons per floor segment. The undersized bolts can't handle the load long-term. Add thermal expansion, wind stress, building movement, those bolts were failing from day one. It was only a matter of time before a section detached. That's criminal negligence, Marcus said. That's engineering fraud. He deliberately specified substandard materials to cut costs while documenting the design as if proper materials were used. The building inspectors trusted his calculations and approved connections they assumed met specifications. Maya scrolled through more documents. And it's not just the facade. The primary structural columns have inadequate load factors. The foundation depth is 18 inches shallower than required for this soil type. The seismic reinforcement is barely code minimum instead of the safety margins that should be standard. She looked up at Marcus. This entire building is a disaster waiting to happen. The facade failure isn't an isolated problem, it's a symptom of systemic engineering deficiencies. Hampton cut corners everywhere to reduce construction costs, probably to maximize Brennan's profit margins. How bad is it? Bad enough that I'm recommending immediate full evacuation and emergency structural reinforcement before catastrophic failure occurs. The facade fell because bolts failed. The next failure could be a structural column. That means floors collapsing. That means people dying. Maya pulled up her preliminary report template. Inspector Crane needs this information tonight so he can order evacuations at dawn. She worked until 3 a.m. writing a report that would end careers, trigger lawsuits, and possibly result in criminal charges against both Hampton and Brennan. Marcus read it over her shoulder, clear, precise, devastating documentation of how greed and incompetence had created a 40-story death trap in downtown Boston. Maya sent the report to Inspector Crane at 3:17 a.m. with a subject line that was clinically professional. Brennan Tower Emergency Structural Assessment, Critical Deficiencies Identified. Crane called at 6 a.m. I've read your report. I'm ordering immediate full building evacuation and emergency shoring operations. We're also opening criminal investigations into Hampton and Brennan for construction fraud and criminal negligence. Your testimony will be central to prosecution. I'll testify, Maya said. After hanging up, she looked at Marcus. Victor Brennan is finished. His flagship building is structurally unsound. Hampton's fraud just destroyed both their careers. And established that you're the most competent structural engineer in Boston, Marcus said. Inspector Crane is going to recommend you for every major assessment project in the city. You just became the go-to expert when serious engineering matters. Maya allowed herself a small smile. Does this mean I still get that job offer you promised? You get better than a job offer. Marcus pulled out his phone, made a call despite the early hour. Amanda Richardson. It's Marcus Blackwell. Sorry for calling at 6 a.m., but I need to discuss expanding the Richardson Tower project. Your father wanted 1 building. I'm proposing we make it 3, a complete urban renewal complex. And I know exactly who should design it. He looked at Maya. Are you ready to design the most ambitious construction project in Boston history? Maya thought about the past 4 days. Waitress to consultant to senior engineer to city expert. Dismissed to essential. Invisible to unavoidable. I'm ready, she said. Good. Because Amanda Richardson just agreed to an emergency meeting at 8 a.m. Bring your best ideas. We're about to turn one tower into a legacy. Amanda Richardson arrived at the meeting in a Tesla that cost more than most people's houses, wearing a charcoal business suit that announced power without needing words. 60 years old, steel gray hair cut short and practical, eyes that assessed people the way surgeons assessed patients, looking for weakness, finding truth. She'd built her own venture capital empire separate from her father's real estate fortune because she'd refused to be known as someone's daughter rather than someone who mattered. She walked into Marcus's conference room at 8 a.m. exactly, shook his hand with a grip that meant business, then turned to Maya. You're the engineer my father would have loved. Richard always said the best minds don't come from the expected places, they come from people who had to fight to be seen. Amanda sat down, pulled out a tablet. Marcus called me at 6 this morning talking about expanding 1 tower into 3. I assume you're the reason he thinks that's possible. I'm the reason he thinks it's structurally achievable, Maya said. Whether it's financially or politically possible is your decision. I like her, Amanda said to Marcus. She doesn't waste time with false modesty. Tell me about this 3-tower concept. Marcus activated the wall display showing the Richardson Tower site, a full city block in downtown Boston currently occupied by condemned buildings awaiting demolition. Your father's original vision was 1 70-story mixed-use tower. Residential, commercial, retail. A landmark building that would define Boston's skyline while revitalizing a neglected neighborhood. But? Amanda prompted. But 1 tower, no matter how impressive, doesn't transform a neighborhood. It's a statement, not a solution. Marcus pulled up preliminary sketches Maya had created between 3 and 6 a.m. 3 towers, 70 stories, 55 stories, 40 stories, arranged in a triangular configuration with shared plaza space at ground level. Residential, commercial, hospitality. A complete urban ecosystem that creates jobs, attracts business, and actually rebuilds the surrounding area instead of just towering over it. Amanda studied the sketches. Construction costs for 3 towers would be what, triple the original budget? Not triple. Maybe double. Maya pulled up cost projections. Because we're building simultaneously on the same site with shared foundation systems and coordinated construction schedules. Economies of scale reduce per unit costs. My structural design allows the 3 towers to share core utilities and seismic reinforcement. Instead of building 3 separate systems, we build one integrated system serving all 3 buildings. Explain that in terms someone without an engineering degree can understand. Maya grabbed a marker, started sketching on the whiteboard. Traditional construction treats each building as separate, individual foundations, individual support systems, individual everything. That's expensive because you're paying for redundancy. My design treats the 3 towers as a single structural entity with 3 vertical elements. They share a reinforced foundation grid. They share central utility cores. They share seismic damping systems. The towers are structurally interdependent, they support each other. What happens if one tower fails? Amanda asked. If one fails catastrophically, the others provide emergency load support that prevents complete collapse. It's actually safer than traditional independent structures. Maya pulled up simulation data. I've run stress models. The Richardson complex design survives scenarios that would destroy conventional buildings, magnitude 7 earthquakes, category 4 hurricane winds, even controlled demolition of one tower doesn't compromise the others. Amanda was quiet for 30 seconds, studying the projections. Construction timeline. 24 months from permit approval to completion, Marcus said. Aggressive but achievable with proper management. Budget? $900 million total. Your father's trust allocated $300 million for the single tower. You'd need to provide the additional $600 million through a combination of equity investment and construction financing. I have the equity, Amanda said. But I don't invest $900 million without understanding who's responsible if this goes wrong. Marcus, I trust your business management. But structural engineering, that's where projects succeed or fail. Miss Santos, you're 21 years old. You've never designed a completed building. You're asking me to bet nearly $1 billion on someone whose entire professional experience consists of 4 days on Marcus's payroll. Why should I? The question wasn't hostile. It was legitimate due diligence from someone who hadn't become wealthy by taking stupid risks. Comment where you're watching from if you trust Maya with this much responsibility. You shouldn't, Maya said simply. Not based on my experience. You should trust me based on my competence. I've designed a structural system that solves problems your father's engineers couldn't. I've exposed fatal flaws in Victor Brennan's flagship building that saved lives by preventing worse catastrophe. I've proven to Inspector Crane and Marcus that I understand structural engineering at a level most people don't reach after decades of practice. She pulled up her Georgia Tech thesis on the display. This is my master's thesis, published in the Journal of Structural Engineering, cited 217 times by other researchers, used as reference material in graduate programs at MIT, Stanford, and Cambridge. I graduated top of my class at 20 years old not because of grade inflation or affirmative action, but because I'm better at this than people twice my age. Maya met Amanda's eyes directly. You're not betting on my experience. You're betting on whether I can do what I say I can do. And I can. Give me 3 months to develop complete construction documents for the Richardson complex. If my design doesn't meet your standards, structurally, financially, practically, you walk away and you've only invested 90 days. But if my design works, you get to build your father's legacy at a scale he never imagined. Amanda looked at Marcus. You believe in her? I believe she's the most talented engineer I've encountered in 30 years of construction. And I believe Richard would have hired her immediately. Marcus paused. He always said the best people are the ones everyone else overlooks because they don't fit conventional expectations. Maya fits that description exactly. Amanda returned her attention to Maya. 3 months to produce complete construction documents. Structural specifications, cost analyses, timeline projections, permit applications, everything needed to break ground the moment city approval comes through. If you deliver, I'll fund the project. If you fail, we scale back to the original single tower. Deal? Deal, Maya said without hesitation. One more condition. Amanda pulled out her phone, showed Maya a photograph. This is the building where my father started his career 60 years ago, an affordable housing project in Roxbury for working families. He never forgot that his success came from people giving him opportunities he hadn't yet earned. If we build this complex, 20% of residential units are reserved for affordable housing. Non-negotiable. That's not a condition, that's an improvement, Maya said. Mixed-income developments create stronger communities than luxury-only projects. I'll incorporate the affordable units into the design from the beginning. Amanda stood, shook Maya's hand. My lawyers will draw up contracts today. You'll receive $200,000 as design fee, $100,000 up front, $100,000 on delivery of complete documents. If the project proceeds to construction, your lead structural engineer for the duration with appropriate salary and equity participation. Marcus will handle the details. After Amanda left, Marcus looked at Maya. You just committed to designing a $900 million construction project in 90 days while simultaneously completing your city assessment of Brennan Tower. That's insane. That's necessary. Maya was already pulling up design software. I didn't come to Boston to serve coffee. I came to build things that matter. This is my chance to do that at a scale that changes people's lives. You're going to need a team. I'll assign 5 engineers to support you. I'll need 7. And I want to choose them myself. Maya pulled up her laptop. Because if I'm betting my reputation on this project, I need people I can trust to execute my vision without undermining it. Done. Start recruiting today. Maya worked through the night, her studio apartment transformed into a war room of architectural drawings, structural calculations, and design iterations. The Richardson complex took shape on her screens, 3 towers rising from shared foundation, interconnected but distinct, functional yet beautiful. At 4 a.m., her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number, Miss Santos, this is Inspector Crane. Based on your Brennan Tower assessment, the Boston City Council wants to meet with you Tuesday morning. They're considering new structural oversight requirements for high-rise construction. Your testimony will inform future building codes. Attendance is mandatory. 9 a.m. at City Hall. Maya texted back, I'll be there. Because between designing the Richardson complex, testifying about Brennan Tower, and establishing herself as Boston's go-to structural engineer, Maya Santos was about to become impossible to ignore. 4 days ago, she'd been invisible. Now, she was unavoidable. The Boston City Council chamber was built to intimidate, marble columns, vaulted ceilings, a gallery where 200 observers watched as decisions affecting millions of lives got debated by 11 elected officials. Maya walked to the witness table at 9 a.m. Tuesday wearing her best professional outfit, which still looked budget compared to the lawyers and corporate executives filling the room. Council President Sarah Martinez called the meeting to order. Today we're addressing structural oversight requirements for high-rise construction following the Brennan Tower failure. Miss Maya Santos, structural engineer responsible for identifying the critical deficiencies, will provide expert testimony. Maya took her seat. 11 council members stared down from their elevated platform. Behind her, the gallery was packed with reporters, engineers, developers, and people whose buildings might be affected by whatever regulations came out of this hearing. For 90 minutes, Maya testified. She explained Hampton's undersized bolts, inadequate load factors, foundation shortcuts. She demonstrated how cost-cutting compromised safety while passing inspections because nobody verified that specified materials matched what was actually installed. She proposed new requirements: independent third-party structural audits, random material testing during construction, engineer liability extending beyond project completion. Some council members loved her recommendations. Others worried about increased costs driving developers out of Boston. The debate stretched past noon. Finally, Council President Martinez called for a vote on Maya's proposed structural oversight reforms. The measure passed 8-3. "Ms. Santos," Martinez said after the vote, "your testimony today will directly influence how Boston builds for the next generation. The Council appreciates your expertise and courage in exposing dangerous practices that could have killed people." Maya nodded. "I'm just doing the work that should have been done before Brennan Tower was ever approved." After the hearing, reporters surrounded her asking questions about Hampton, Brennan, the Richardson Complex project that had leaked to media overnight. Maya kept answers professional, declined to speculate about criminal charges, refused to criticize competitors by name. Marcus met her outside City Hall. "You just became the most influential structural engineer in Boston at 21 years old. City officials will consult you on every major project going forward." "Good. Maybe that means fewer buildings will collapse." Maya pulled out her phone, checked calendar notifications. "I have design meetings for the Richardson Complex in 3 hours, material specifications due to your procurement team by Friday, and 7 engineer candidates to interview for my team before the weekend. When do you sleep?" "Sleep is what I'll do after we break ground." Maya started walking toward the parking garage. "Besides, I spent 8 months sleeping while the engineering world ignored my applications. I'm done sleeping." The Richardson Complex construction documents took exactly 87 days to complete, 3 days ahead of deadline. Maya's team of 7 engineers worked 20-hour days producing structural specifications, material lists, construction schedules, safety protocols. The design incorporated Amanda Richardson's affordable housing requirement seamlessly, mixing luxury units with workforce housing so thoroughly that external appearance gave no indication which units cost $3 million versus $300,000. Amanda approved the complete package without requesting a single revision. "This is exactly what my father envisioned. Better, actually. He'd be proud." Permits took another 6 weeks to navigate bureaucracy. Ground broke on the Richardson Complex in March. 18 months after Marcus had thrown a coffee cup across a conference table in frustration. Construction completed 22 months later, 2 months ahead of schedule and $17 million under budget. 0 safety incidents. 0 structural failures. 0 compromises. Comment where you're watching from if this is the kind of ending you wanted. The 3 towers transformed Boston's skyline: 70 stories, 55 stories, 40 stories, arranged in elegant triangular harmony with a public plaza connecting them at ground level. Mixed-use spaces that created 4,000 jobs. Affordable housing that let teachers, nurses, service workers live in the neighborhood where they worked. Retail spaces that attracted local businesses instead of just corporate chains. Maya Santos received the American Institute of Architects Medal of Honor at 23, youngest recipient in the award's 100-year history. She became partner at Blackwell Industries with her own design division. She hired engineers other firms rejected: too young, too unconventional, too different from what the industry expected genius to look like. 5 years after serving Marcus Blackwell coffee, Maya ran the largest structural engineering team in Boston. She designed 43 buildings, revolutionized affordable housing construction, trained 200 young engineers, and changed how an entire city thought about who deserved opportunity. The Richardson Complex stood as proof that talent doesn't wait for permission, it just waits to be seen. And once seen, it builds legacies that outlast everyone who doubted it existed.